Jordan, and I'm really stoked to be presenting a new series called Sound is the New 4K for Zoom. Now, why is sound the new 4K? Well, regardless what gear you've got, unless you've got the right sounds, the images really don't amount to much. And when we talk about sound, there's sounds and there's big sounds and there's just freaking crazy sounds. And today, I'm actually stoked to be joined by Campbell. Now, Campbell, mate, I don't know where to start because you basically take sound to a next level. We've spoken to drummers, we've spoken to people who put beats out there, but your beats resonate to tens of thousands of people. Maybe tell people a bit about what you do, mate.
Yeah, cool. So, look, firstly, thanks for having me on board. This is really cool. It's a great series. So what we do, I'm the director of a group called the D Square Drumline, and we specialize in large, high-profile sporting events and corporate events and stuff like that. So we put together groups of anywhere from a solo drummer or percussionist right through to groups of 40. It could be a marching band, it could be just drummers, it could be whatever you want. And our job is to stand in the middle of the field and project our sound all the way up to the back of the MCG half the time. So it's cool. It's good fun.
It's certainly a career. So when you're growing up, I mean, not that we ever really grew up.
Yeah, I definitely haven't grown up, just for the record, if anyone's unsure.
At what point do you decide? Because traditional musicians or artists will go down specific tracks, right? They'll choose something. What makes you choose a big band sound?
Look, I mean, this may not be the answer that you want to hear, but I kind of fell into it through default. I had a couple of cool experiences when I was young to play in a small marching band at my school. Then I joined a group called the Australian Youth Band and eventually was invited to perform at the Beijing Olympics in 2008. So speaking of big sounds, that had 2,000 musicians from all over the world playing in one band. China does it big. And then I came back and I just had this unique experience. I had a background in percussion that very few Australians had. And there weren't many opportunities for me to pursue what I'd learnt and what I enjoyed. So the only option really for me was to set up my own group. And we very quickly got quite big. So within 6 months of being set up, we were the feature act for the New Year's Eve celebrations at Federation Square. I got the call to do that gig and I didn't even have a drumline at that point. I didn't have a group of musos. It's like, well, we got to find a way to do this. So, yeah, it got out of control pretty quick and I've just been trying to keep up ever since. So
That's crazy, man. I guess this is a different chat because we'll get onto the sound and what motivates later on, but this is almost like a mini sound business model because when I listen to you talk, the first thing that goes on in my brain is let's do something that firstly not many people do on earth and yet it's extremely popular. So maybe cover like how unique is this and why do you think it's so well received, especially in Australia?
yeah, well, look, what we do specifically in Australia is there's us in Melbourne, there's a group in Sydney, there's a sort of community group in Adelaide, and then one smaller group in Perth, and that's pretty much it. So in Australia, there's not many groups doing it, but we're kind of the guys doing it at that professional level. So we're pretty lucky to have that as our sort of driving force. In the US, this is a pretty big thing. So the drum corps, marching band, DCI culture in the US is pretty huge. And we're seeing that start to come through in pop culture a lot more as, you know, we see documentaries come out of the US, maybe featuring high schools and marching bands are part of that, or we listen to the latest trap record and you hear samples of marching bands in the background and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty big overseas, and I think that's why it has the traction it has in Australia, because people have seen it, people know about it, and then they find out that there's actually some people here doing it, and they're like, oh, that's cool, we want that. You know, so I guess we've kind of positioned ourselves as the people doing it. So when someone Googles drumline in Australia, we're the ones who pop up. So
Wow, you know, it's for those people that aren't aware, it's like comparing going for a drive with your mum in a car on the weekend and then going to a NASCAR race. Because when I was living and working in the States making shows there, my flatmate John Goldie, he was one of the top guys at Yamaha,
Cool.
Yamaha Music in LA, and he said to me, "Listen," I said, "What? Like, you're chatting away." I said, "What do you do every Thursday night when you go out?" He goes, "Well, I actually direct a big band." And I said to him, "What's big band?" And he said, "Just come down to the local high school in LA, and we'll show you." Seriously, blew my mind.
Yeah.
For people that haven't experienced that, how would you describe what that sound is when you turn up and hear something like that? Because I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to explain for sure. I think the first time I heard like particularly the brass section of it, like I'd done the drum thing myself for a long time, but the first time I heard the brass live and I heard the volume and the power they had, it was like this wave that washed over me, and it, like I could feel the sound coming towards me, and then it hit me, and then I felt it in my body, and then from there it's all a bit of a blur. It's the most insane thing, and like as you say, you can't explain it. And I headed over to the US on a little bit of a study tour, and went to the DCI finals. And the first thing that you do as part of DCI, before you go in and watch the performances or anything like that, you watch everyone outside warming up. And so these drummers and brass players are just warming up, but you've got 100 brass playing these insane exercises, and they're trying to just stretch their chops. They're trying to get ready for the performance, so they're pushing as hard as they can, and it's just cooked. So yeah, it's cool, and it's a feeling, it's a wave, it's an emotion, it's just so different to anything you've ever heard before.
So now that you've got this insane superpower, right? So you've got this insane superpower. So you're basically a portable, massive speaker that's going out into the public. How do you decide what you put through that channel? Because for people that, again, this is a very niche area, but as you said, in America, very big. How do you decide what to project out to people that goes through them? Because that's a pretty powerful thing to have at your disposal. Where does that start, and how do you take us through that process?
So look, I mean, in the US, they have entire teams of creative directors and composers writing the music for the DCI groups. So they will start writing their charts, like right at the start of the year. Just they basically finish their season and then they start all over again. So they spend about 6 months writing all of the music and getting stuff out to the students or to the performers to start learning. And then throughout the course of the tour, they're on tour for about 3 months full time. They're constantly refining and polishing and adding to it. And of course, being a marching band, we're not just talking the sound, we're also talking the movement and the visual and how all of that kind of comes together. So it's a massive process for those guys over there. Obviously here I don't get to go on tour for 3 months and polish everything and spend 6 months writing 12 minutes of music for my performers. So it really depends on what we're doing. We have basically a standard set of charts that my musicians need to be able to play at a day's notice. So there's probably 25 minutes of music there that they just have in their heads and in their hands ready to play. And that stuff is fairly groove oriented, pretty like, if you were at a festival and you just heard this like percussive sound coming towards you and it kind of made you want to boogie, that's the idea behind that stuff. For other things, we'll have a bit more time. So we were a big part of the opening ceremony of the Rugby League World Cup back in, I want to say 2017. And we spent about 3 months writing all of the music for that. It was a 14-minute opening ceremony, and they wanted percussion beds under the whole thing. So we wrote all of that, and we were going backwards and forwards with the creative directors and, making sure we were ticking all the boxes for them. And then we spent 2 days in Sing Sing Studios just laying down all of the recordings, doubling parts, thickening it out, just polishing it and making it sound great. So when we got into the stadium and we heard ourselves over the PA, it was a lot of fun.
And that's a bit of feedback though too. I mean, if you're a drummer on a stage, you got your earpieces, but when you're out, I mean, what people have to understand, this is live, right? So this isn't recorded. This is live. Mm-hmm. General question before I go on to something else is, when you make a mistake, is it super obvious?
Well, I mean, it depends. It depends. I have made some corkers over the years. So what we do, in addition to all the sound, we've got lots of stick tricks, we've got throws, we've got visuals. So sometimes a stick will go down and you're the guy who's standing there pulling out a new stick. Pretty hard to cover that one. But, I think anytime you make a mistake, any top level performer finds a way to roll with that and make it part of the show. So if I drop a stick, then I make a big motion of getting out a new one and chucking it up in the air and catching it and, continuing to play with my other hand and that sort of stuff, so that you kind of find a way to make it part of the experience. I term what we do as high risk, high reward when it comes to visuals. There's a lot of risk involved. When it comes off, it's awesome. But, sometimes we do hit some issues. So as part of being a high risk, high reward thing, the audience see that. That's why they enjoy it. They know that there's every chance that you're going to fall over at some point, and that's what makes it so exciting. They just roll with the punches when it goes wrong.
Sounds like the life of an artist in general, I think, mate.
Totally.
so also, before I get on to more of the finite stuff, when you're practicing and you're rehearsing, and I've seen in some of your Instagram feeds, you use the Zoom cameras and mics.
Mm-hmm.
How important and how do you capture this and then play it back? So it's almost like football teams watching over their plays over and over again. They look at their tape. Is this what you're using the technology for, so you can capture the sounds and the vision and then play it back and look at what you're doing? How does that all work?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a big part of it. In our ideal world, we'd have a wall full of mirrors and be playing in front of those mirrors so we can see stuff and perfect it as we play. We looked into it. It's real expensive. We can't do that. So what we now do, wherever possible, we're recording rehearsals, and then I'm sharing that footage with everyone through the miracle of the cloud. So having the ability to just like take a tiny little, my go-to device, I'm actually using it right now, is the Zoom Q2N 4K. And I'll just take that, I'll stick it on a tripod at the start of rehearsal, facing the drum line. It's super wide angle, so we can get about 25 of us in at the same time, which is more than enough. And it records in high enough quality that we can hear from the lowest bass drum through to the sibilants of the crash cymbals, and we get that fairly well balanced sound. I mean, it's still just two mics, so it's not absolutely perfect. It's not a studio recording, but it's more than good enough to listen back. A lot of the stuff that you've seen on YouTube or on Instagram is just recorded using that. We very rarely bother re-recording and overdubbing stuff because it sounds good enough. And then, we use that either for promotional purposes. We use it to send previews of what we're doing to our clients. We use it to review our own playing and polish up on that. It's just such a useful thing to have. And man, the difference between having that now versus 15 years ago when I started this stuff, like it's night and day in terms of being able to review our own practice sessions. So
technology, and this is what we've covered in some of the other forums we've spoken to artists. The technology right now is purely insane. What these little devices allow you to do, I don't think people understand that. And the fact that a little 4K camera can capture a big band sound it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
It's bonkers, yeah.
So you also then taken the big band and you do a lot of smaller stuff. I mean, because again, you can't live on big bands alone, as I'm told.
Yep.
What else what else in the world do you translate it to, and tell us about your musical life, because sound seems to play a pretty big role in your world.
Yeah, look, I mean, when people ask me what I do for a living, it's incredibly hard to describe. Like I say, I basically run a drum line, and they're like, what on earth is a drum line? So I generally describe myself as a musician. And when people ask me what type of music I play, my answer is anything that pays. So if someone's going to pay me to turn up and play, I will turn up. So I've done everything from the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra through to a Limp Bizkit cover band. Whoever's paying me, I'm there. So one of my other regular gigs, though, is a little crew called Not My Circus, which is a really fun little trio. And we play what's called brass house music. So it's basically like house-influenced beats and house vibes. Lots of four to the floor with kind of offbeat tambourines going on. And then brass lines played over the top of that. And we do covers of, top 40 pop songs and a whole bunch of originals and stuff as well. So what we do with that, we love getting live footage of us out and about performing. Not only because it allows us to share what we're doing with people who enjoy our sound, but because it helps us get the next gig. So we are for example, for the past 2 or 3 years, I can't remember, have been one of the roving performers at Firelight Festival, which is this awesome little festival down in Docklands. Which is just based around fire. It's a winter solstice thing, and there's constantly, like flamethrowers going off and fireworks in the background and stuff. So we've had these incredible scenes where we've been jamming and this wall of flame pops up next to us. And so suddenly we're trying to get this camera to be able to deal with nighttime and a flamethrower all at once. So like incredible dynamic range is hitting this thing. So, with that sitting out the front and recording our set, we know that we can watch it back, we can enjoy it ourselves, we can share it, we can, promote what we're doing through it. So, whether it's that big band sound, whether it's, 40 drummers all at once, or whether it's a slightly more nuanced, where we're trying to pick up trumpet lines and then a bari sax and a drum, we're sort of getting into lots of different territory here. And it's really cool being able to explore how it picks up different sounds and what we can do with that retrospectively. Once we've got a good quality source, how can we play with that? How can we, have fun with it in post-production and do something cool with it? And yeah, I just really love exploring that stuff. So
it is pretty cool. And I mean, in a way, whoops, I think my camera's gone funny. There we go. In a way, you're like a one-man band that's put it into a big band. For people watching this that might just be into percussions or strings or whatever have you, how have you managed to balance all those voices in your head to create a crew of doing everything? Because it sounds like you don't have a spare minute in the day.
Yeah, look, I guess I'm a very like deadline oriented person. So I just bounce from one thing to the next. So when things are coming up, I just focus singularly on that thing, and whatever it is that I'm doing, it gets all of my attention until something more important comes along and pushes it out of the way. So yeah, I mean, when we talk about, obviously I'm a teacher as well. I think there are very few of us who can just perform full time. So I'm teaching in a couple of schools. So, when we're in a beautiful auditorium and I've got a percussion ensemble rehearsing something that they're playing with the strings or playing with whatever we've written for them. It's really nice being able to just give that the time it needs, focus on that one thing, get the take we need, get the recording we need. Because I mean, right now in lockdown, there's no concerts happening. There's nothing like that. So, we might have a 20-minute rehearsal to get a video to send out to parents to go, this is what your kids are doing at the moment. So, being able to just quickly bash something out and, have the teacher hat on and not have to worry about technology or anything like that and just trust that it's going to do its thing is a really, really great thing. So, in the classroom where your day is so structured and you've got constant deadlines and you've never got as much time as you want, it's been a godsend. It's been so useful. So
that's cool, man. And the basis of what we've been chatting with everyone about is the importance of sound in motion. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, when I'm making my shows, without the right sound, you could shoot everything on an iPhone. Really, I mean, the sound is what's important. You've crossed over because of technology into the vision side of it. What's your point of view on the importance of sound being not just music, not just being vocals, not just being, it's the whole myriad of things. I mean, how important, and maybe talk me through your perspective on how much the vision that we've seen everyday lives on TVs and devices is carried by the sound that comes with it.
Yeah, well, look, I think, I guess, like, as a percussionist, anything that I hear all the time, to me, could be some kind of music. You just have to find a way to organize it into something that's recognizable. So sound as a concept it's obviously all around us all the time. And, you close your eyes and you can imagine a place based on things you hear. So if you hear some crickets and a bird chirping and maybe a waterfall, you close your eyes and you're up somewhere in the Daintree rainforest. Now, on the flip side, I feel that in a lot of ways, video without sound, for me personally, doesn't evoke the same emotion. I think for me, the way our brains process sound is very, very different to the way it processes video. I feel that when we listen to sound, if we think about it from a technological perspective, if you think about sound, the bit rate required to create marvelous sound, a beautiful sound that we hear coming through the TV or coming over Tidal or whatever, isn't that high. So when you hear sound, it doesn't require that much processing by the brain. It's such a natural thing for us, and it leaves all of this bandwidth for us to imagine and for us to visualize things within our own imagination rather than having a video rammed down our throat in some ways. So to me, and I kind of talk about this with students sometimes when I get them to close their eyes and play, because it allows them to hear better. You're no longer processing all of this information around you. You're only processing what's going on here. So to me, the way sound works as an element, well, it's not an element, but you know what I mean? The way sound works as a piece of information that our brain processes makes it so different to anything else. And it can transport you. It can enhance an emotion. It can enhance a feeling, take you somewhere new, whatever it is. And you've still got all of that brain power left for everything else. So
eloquently put. It's true. I mean, I always tell people sound helps you see. And I've actually worked with some blind athletes over the years, and they actually see better than people that actually have sight, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
So I love the way you put that, and it was interesting. We spoke with a very famous sound recordist last week, and he was talking about recording wind. And we said, well, isn't wind just noise? He goes, no. Wind is actually, the sound of wind is when it bounces off an object. And when you talk about percussion in particular with the wind instruments, it is just wind until you block the path through a trumpet or another instrument, right?
Definitely.
So now with that in mind, how do you then apply your creativity? Because you obviously master a lot of different instruments. When you sit down to create something, where do you start? Like, how does it work in a musician's brain?
That's a tough question. I think it depends on what it is you're trying to create. So, I very rarely, with what I do, most of what I'm doing, as I said before, is kind of goal oriented. It's like, okay, this is the outcome, this is what we need. Create something to make it happen. I spend less time writing stuff just for me. So although that's something I should do more of, but anyway, so what my process generally is to, I think for me, I always start with a bass line, as in, like, I like hearing a groove before anything else. And then from there, I want to work out how to introduce that groove in a way that sucks people in. We all make fun of dance music, but there's something behind the drop. Like, when you're waiting, and then there's the drop. Like, it's cool. Like, we can all get behind that, right? So my process generally is to work out, like, what I want the feeling to be and how I can use a groove, or in some cases a melody, to create that feeling, and then how I can set that up effectively, and then how I can end it. And that's at the baseline how it kind of works. I don't really overthink the creativity thing too much. I think I kind of just have a series of things that I've done over the course of 20 years, and I'm just plugging them into different frameworks. And, I think one of the keys is to sometimes make sure that you have a few guidelines. And I say this to students a lot, when you're trying to learn to be creative, a lot of the time you have to limit yourself. If someone just sits you behind a drum kit and says play, they go, well, what do you want me to play? Do I play jazz? Do I play a rock groove? Is this a drum solo? Are we in Paris? Like, so there's it's just too broad. Or, here's a blank canvas, paint. And unless you're a painter with enough experience to know what you paint well, you're not going to know what to do. So I think those limitations that, because I'm project driven, because I have an outcome that I need to hit, those limitations often mean that I don't have those big existential creative problems of what do I do now? It's just like, okay, this is what I need to do. Here's the tools that I'm going to use to get there. So
it's very, I guess it sounds very habitual. Do you find yourself sometimes just falling into the same creative traps? Do you have like a favorite instrument that it'll always start with that? It'll start with a simple beat, or it'll start with something?
Yeah. Look, I think when I said I often start with a bass groove, I think that probably is that's my Achilles heel. Like, because I love that bass. So I want to start with something really fat and really chunky and get people going, oh, cool. What's that? Right. But sometimes that, starting with that all of the time can be super limiting. So I guess when I do occasionally sit down and write something just for me, what I'll try and listen to what other cool groups are doing. I'll jump on YouTube, which again is a resource that I didn't have 15 years ago when I was starting this. For any youngins listening, YouTube used to not have ads. Can you believe that? We used to just be able to watch it without people trying to sell us stuff.
But also,
anyway,
Photoshop didn't have layers either. So.
True, and I could not have afforded Final Cut. So where was I going with that? So 15 years ago when I first started writing stuff, I didn't have many reference points. I didn't have much, I couldn't find much drumline material to listen to. Now I just jump on YouTube and plug in one group that I like and I go down the rabbit hole, which sometimes is amazing for creativity. I mean, sometimes you end up stuck in the rabbit hole and end up doing nothing, but that's okay. It's part of the process, So
when you add music or sound to Vision, why is it that some simplicity resonates and other things need something more complex? Because we've spoken to, I guess, soloists in music and in creative artistry and everything else, but you come from a really unique angle because you encompass such an enormous array. When you're looking at a simple scene, whether it's in a film or something else, what is it that resonates with people if it's more complex, like an orchestra, or, for example, the iconic sound, probably the most iconic drum sound being taps?
Look, I think the thing with simplicity is it lends itself to accessibility. So when something's really simple, you don't have to be a musician to understand what's going on. When it's just a simple repetitive drum groove, anyone can sit there and kind of tap along with it and understand what's going on. All right. Versus sitting there and listening to, I don't know, Leonard Bernstein changing time signatures all over the place, aharmonic stuff, just musicians sit there and go, he's a genius. It's incredible. Non-musicians sit there and go, what's happening? I don't understand. Or your Philip Glass completely aleatoric stuff, which is all based on chance. It's like, so I think simplicity is accessible to everyone. And in that sense is able to evoke simplistic emotions. And I don't mean simplistic in a negative way, but, those base emotions that we all feel and we all understand. Whereas more complex material requires a higher level of understanding. And if you don't understand it, then it creates tension because you're sitting there. I mean, if you're paying attention to it, you're sitting there trying to work it out. You're sitting there trying to resolve this tension that's being created by this thing that is happening over there. So, I think being aware of those things as compositional tools or creative tools or whatever can be incredibly useful. I think one of the most powerful sounds that we can hear is just, the heartbeat, the dum dum, dum dum, dum dum. And, we speed that up, we create an accelerando for a musician, Or if you're not a musician, you get a little nervous. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. It gets faster. So, that really, that sort of internal, intrinsic understanding of simplistic things can really inform the way in which we engage with it.
Wow, that's crazily interesting hearing it. Because when you spend a life putting this together and you hear someone else explain it in a different way that appears in your head is friggin' awesome.
It is, isn't it? And
it's pretty cool.
yeah, and I guess I don't, to be asked these questions, I think like this is stuff that I've probably at some point subconsciously thought about, but having this teased out of me, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like I hadn't actually thought about it in this much detail before,
Well, in that case, we'll go a bit deeper.
Good.
So there's so much at your disposal right now in terms of technology. In your mind, have we reached a plateau? I know with camera technology that it's just become obscene because we don't need 4K, 12K cameras. In your world, do you think we've found a limit? And if we have, what do you think is going to be the next level? Because it blows my mind. If I was going to get into filmmaking right now, I wouldn't know where to tell someone to start because it's just too many options. I mean, what are your views on that?
Look, I definitely don't think we've hit the limit. I feel like humans have an incredible ability to just keep reinventing the wheel. Like if you think that's where we started and where we are now, like we've done a lot of reinventing over the years. And I feel like every time you kind of think, okay, we don't need more than this. We've achieved what we need for now. We don't really need to go too much further. For me, I remember thinking about the transition from 1080p to 4K. And I was like, well, why do I need 4 times the pixels? Or this already looks great. It's high definition. Why do I want more than that? And from a creative perspective, if I film in 4K, but I'm outputting in 1080p, then I can punch in 4 times and not lose any quality. So it gives me flexibility. So I feel like the more technology advances, the more it's going to enhance our ability to be flexible and to find new ways to achieve those things that perhaps once we could conceptualize but couldn't really make happen. And now we can actually, achieve and visualize and see and make happen. So, I think, in terms of where technology is going to go, who knows? I think they're talking, holographic type stuff will eventually be kicking on. It's all just to do with bandwidth at this point. Like if we can process enough information, if we can make our computer processors fast enough and our internet fast enough and our camera processors, we just keep adding layers and layers and layers to what we've already got. You look at filming in 360, all that is taking, I don't know, however many 4K images and stitching them together, and suddenly you can look around, so why not? If we do that on the inverse and we get 3D models of things that we can look at and move around, at first it'll be on the screen, but then we'll project it, so if I was a futurist, my money would be on holograms and smell-o-vision. Those are my predictions: holograms and smell-o-vision.
You don't know how they will work with a band on stage.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, though, people always say there's only a certain number of riffs and everything's just recreated. How much of your music and how much do musicians in your space create originality or new things and new sounds? What scope is there for that within your genre?
That's a big one.
Well, we're getting down the business end of the deal now, right?
We are. Yeah, look, I think in terms of creating new sounds, that's to be honest, that's something I don't get to explore too much in what I do because
so there's no looping in big band sound though.
Look, particularly like at the top level in kind of the DCI and stuff like that, there is that sort of stuff happening. So, quick history, the DCI was formed in 71, but came out of, almost a century of marching band competition in the US. And ever since then, the Drum Corps International has had a governing body like most things do. And every year they kind of adjust the rules and change the rules and all this sort of thing. And about 20 years ago, I want to say, they started allowing electronics to be introduced. So they were allowed to bring in electronic keyboards for that purpose, to sample and create sound effects and all that sort of stuff. Then they started to bring in amplification for vocals only. And people are going, well, hold on, our entire existence has been acoustic because we're from a marching band background. Like, at what point are we going to put a lid on this? Now they're starting to amplify trumpet solos and stuff like that. And once upon a time, if you were playing a trumpet solo, you had to play it loud enough. But now, people, the traditionists are like, this sucks because they're not pushing themselves to learn to play louder. Whereas all, the people who are embracing it are like, well, this is great. I can hear the trumpet more clearly, So, so there's constant change going on there. And the way vocals are being incorporated in, the way they've now incorporated trombones, which were traditionally not allowed. So, creating new sounds in that sense is really, really interesting. And one of the first year that I remember hearing electronics as like a really big part of a show was in 2014. The first year I went to DCI, coincidentally crashed a bike, broke my arm, so was at DCI finals with a broken arm, pepped up on codeine, with no idea what was going on. And then next minute, a group called the Blue Coats, they had this show called Tilt, and the whole thing was based around the idea of things shifting and tilting and moving. And what they did, the horns had this line where they held a note and then they pitch bent it, and they pitch bent it to precisely where the keyboard player was then able to bend it further electronically. So they stopped, the keyboard took over, he bent it electronically and then took it back up, and they picked it up on the end of his bend back up. So it created this incredible effect where you almost couldn't tell who was the trumpets and who was the keyboard. And it was it was mind-blowing. And I'd never seen anyone do that. And I don't think I've really ever seen that used in music, because it takes a level of choreography in the sense of these different sections working together in such a way that isn't improvisational. It's not, so you wouldn't see it in most improvisational bands. You wouldn't see it written into really any jazz or anything like that, because it's not of that style. An orchestra can't do it because they don't have electronics. So it was a unique situation which enabled this thing to happen that I've never seen anywhere else. So although I don't get to do it, it definitely exists within this world.
So why don't you? You said a few times in this discussion you should do more for yourself. You don't do enough for yourself. It seems to be the plague of people that are busy being creative, but does that not stifle what you do? I mean, why don't you make time to do stuff yourself?
I mean, that's a big philosophical life question. Yeah. I guess there's 24 hours in a day, and 3 of those are dedicated to my amazing wife, and 2 are dedicated. Oh, I'm a lucky guy. 2 are dedicated to my cats. 3 are dedicated to eating. So, I feel like your
priorities all wrong. That's the problem.
Look, I mean, I don't think I am the most creative person ever, to be completely honest. I don't think I'm a particularly creative person, and I think that's okay. I think my role in what I do is, and I've really sort of, I don't want to say I decided this, but I sort of became aware of this as I was setting up D Squared. What I want to do with my groups is entertain people and then provide opportunities for the next generation to build upon what we've done. So I very much see my role. I see education as a really big part of what I do. And as much as I'd love to spend time really honing my own chops, or spending time writing some mind-blowing piece of music that no one can play because, I've just gone to some insane level of Ham's inner brain workings, it's just not, I don't feel like it's my focus. And for a while there, I was a little guilty about that. I was like, oh, I'm not the musician I should be. When I think I just have come to an understanding that I have prioritized other things, and I'm totally cool with that. I love it. So,
Well, as your arm says, everything happens for a reason, right?
oh, you can see that, can you? It does,
No,
yeah.
I've
So,
done my research. As I said, I just looked at 2 images on Instagram, and that was one of them. I found that quite interesting. So, mate,
yeah.
thank you for the chat. Thank you for the chat. Is there anything I'd be remiss without asking? Is there anything you want to ask me?
Uh, man, I think we really got into a lot here. I think we dialed down into a lot of detail and covered a lot of information. So,
I mean,
yeah,
I've got a million questions, but we can't fit it all into the time. But look, mate, thank you. I thank you very much for joining us, and also I think you've given some really good insight into other creatives within the music industry, but also giving people, especially in lockdown, something to think about to do with their spare time. So, mate,
mm,
thank you for joining us.
no worries. Thanks heaps for having me. It was a blast.